I always tell people, like, I'm as gothy as it gets. And they're like, you don't look like a goth. And I'm like, well, I sat around all day, I carved gravestones, and I listened to black metal. I just don't have the eye makeup. You know what I mean?
Death and stone carving. That's our episode today. The overlap, at least to me, seems very obvious. Because what do we put up above the bodies of our dead but stones? And how do we get their names on there? We carve them. I'm Victor M. Sweeney, the internet's favorite mortician. And you're joining us today on the podcast Death and, where we figure out that overlap between death and all the other things in life. Today we've got a really great guest that joins us, Matt Loughlin from the UK. He started as a fashion designer, later morphed into stone carving, and our discussion really centers today around meaning. What does a stone mean? What do emblems we put on it mean? And how does that reflect our life as we look back upon it? An important part of the show is that we make it ours, yours and mine. To that effect, I've asked for people to send in questions that we can answer during the show. And this is really beautiful. I've had so many people send questions. And some of them are serious, some of them are kind of silly. But at the end of the day, this is how the show is shared between all of us, because there is this great commonality in death, surely, but also in life. So let's see what we have in the grab bag today. Here's a question from Illyrium. Has anybody ever asked to dress a body in a unique outfit? Perhaps a clown suit? ? This is actually a really lovely question because clothing is just such an integral part to how we remember and celebrate our dead. It does call to mind, actually. I had a family friend pass away. And the previous year, he'd gone to Germany for Oktoberfest and brought back a set of lederhosen. And he told his family very jokingly, "When I die, lay me out in my lederhosen." Well, that summer, he was doing yard work and had a massive heart attack, tipped over, died in the yard. And so sure enough, when we drove back for his funeral, there's Jake laid out in the casket, right? Left hand over right, eyes closed, glasses on, wearing German lederhosen. Which, honestly, for a tragic situation of a man that was, in all accounts, too young, it kind of brought a smile to people's faces. And I think it was, I don't know, it changed the mood a little bit. It made us reflective, but also when you saw it, you laughed. And there's something very special to that. So to a clown outfit, I'm not sure how that would work in the same way, but maybe it would. I guess I'll just have to wait for someone to ask. Here's a question from Rhodey Grimes. What did you want to be when you were little? It's actually kind of a nice question. I don't think anybody sets out when they're a little kid to be an undertaker. Nobody really wants to do this job when you're 4, 5, and 6. For myself, the first job I always wanted to be was actually a pirate. Always wanted to be a buccaneer from the time I was a little boy. And then I soon learned that Caribbean pirates no longer exist. So my backup plan was to be a Catholic priest. And that too was something I found very compelling. But as I grew older and started discerning what I wanted to do with my life and maybe even what God wanted for me, if I can be so bold, I soon discerned that I did not have the vocation to become a priest. And being I couldn't fall back on my dreams of being a pirate, undertaker seemed like the next best choice. Before we get to our guest, I want to quickly tell you about my new book, Now Departing, being released on October 14th of this year. It's been a real pleasure to find myself writing a book. I never thought I'd be an author of anything more than local obituaries. But if you like the podcast, I think you'll like the book too, and vice versa. There'll be a link to order a hard copy, or even a link to the audiobook, which I narrated myself, in the show notes. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Now, you might think that the overlap between stone carving and death is super obvious. And to be fair, I do too. Because what are we going to talk about but headstones? But as we start discussing with our guest today, what really comes out is not simply the hammering of letters into rocks, but really a discussion about symbolism and meaning that I think is really powerful. So at the end of the day, as we explore the overlap between death and stone carving, I think we need to think a little bit deeper than what's on the surface and get to the heart of the matter, which I think we do. So with that, let us jump into the discussion with Matt Loughlin, a letter carver and stone carver from Somerset, England, who began his career in fashion, oddly enough, and morphed into working with something a little more solid, stones. Here today we have Matt Loughlin. I have been following you on Instagram for a while now, mainly because your art popped across my screen, and I've just been absolutely captivated with what you've been capturing in stone. And I don't know if you knew this. I'm a very, very amateur stone carver, and I've picked it up lately. But I've been designing headstones for a number of years for people in my town, and I realized at a certain point that if I really wanted to know how the thing works, I should probably learn how to make it myself.
Gotta look under the hood.
And being a poor person, I realized I can't buy a pneumatic chisel or anything really fancy or a sandblaster. So instead I bought a set of chisels online and have just been doing it on the fly.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I use.
How did you get your start? That's what I want to know.
Oh man, how long is this podcast?
As long as you want, brother.
Days, relax, sit back, relax. It's gonna be a while. No, it's just basically before I did this, I've been doing this for about. I've had my business. My apprenticeship ended about 5 years ago, so I've been doing it for about 8 years, 8-ish, 9-ish years. Okay. And before that, I was a graphic designer, and I worked in the fashion industry, which
really
sort of seems like a non sequitur, I guess. But
yeah, are they related?
No,
stone carving and fashion?
No, not at all. But the design element, what I do is to some extent graphic design in stone. That's how I think about it. So it's really, it's still graphic design. It's just the skill set is there. It's just a different medium, really. You know what I mean? So, so anyway, I kind of fell into working in the fashion industry because I come from a very small town in central New York. And like most people in my age at the time, I was looking for a way to escape it down to the big city. Yeah. And a friend of a friend had knew someone who sort of hooked me up with an internship or an interview for an internship at a clothing brand. So I took it because it was just the only opportunity I really had at that point. So, and it got me out of my hometown and, so that got me down that path. So I was never really a fashion person, but, I'm a design person. And so I sort of fell into that. And so I did that for about 10 years in New York. And then I moved, my wife, who's English, I met her in New York, and we moved abroad and we lived in Norway for 5 years. And so when I moved here in 2015, I sort of had a bit of a existential crisis. Didn't want to keep working in that industry. And I came to England thinking of I'm going to have a new start. I'm going to do something different. And of course I came here and I didn't know anyone and didn't really have any opportunities and sort of hit a wall wondering what I was going to do.
And that's so interesting to me because I look at my life. I was born in a suburb of Detroit.
Oh yeah.
And then through a similar kind of long circuit, end up in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like I'm from a little town of 1,600 people in Minnesota.
Right.
So I kind of did the opposite, going back.
Well,
so now are you
to the small town? It's just in a different country now.
There we go. So do you Do you find like there are similarities like back home in small town New York that you find like in Somerset?
No. I mean,
No.
it sort of is quite a different place. I mean, it's kind of
Yeah.
why I'm here, to be fair. It's similar in that there's lots of there's lots of dairy farms and apple orchards, there's
Yeah.
lots of that where I'm from. But the sort of the I don't know, the sort of the presence of history in England is just, I don't know, it's a whole different thing. In America, it's such a new country. It's like if somebody's house is from
Yeah.
1880, people are like, whoa. And it's like, I know
Yeah.
people
Oh
that live
yeah.
in house from the 15th century here. So the presence of history here makes it a very different experience from back home. You know what I mean? And it feeds into why I got into this in the first place.
That's what I was just going to ask that. Like does the kind of long history and kind of you know every building, every cobblestone in the street has been trod over by thousands of people, generations.
Mm.
Does that play into like how you like to design a stone? Like I was reading this book last year, and it was something like how to design 1,000-year-old house.
All right.
Basically like you want to build 1,000-year-old house. Like you want to build something that's going to last.
Sure.
And I think there's something about working in stone that is really beautiful.
Well, there's
Do
a
you,
durability in it, I suppose.
yeah.
The great irony being that stone is actually really fragile. People think
Tell me
of
about
it as
that.
this monolithic material that's, weathers the ages, but, if you drop stone, it's a bad day. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's, you know
Well,
what I mean? It's
what
not as forgiving as wood and other things, it's,
I can believe that. Well, I suppose that's why they say set in stone, right? Like you have one
yeah, well,
shot.
yeah, for sure. It's a reoccurring cliche.
What stones do you work with most? Because up where I'm at,
Yeah.
Minnesota's like granite country, so it's
Yeah.
all granite up here,
Yeah.
which is, at least for me, borderline impossible to
No,
chisel
I
by
don't work
hand.
granite. No, I don't.
What do you use? Like what grows what grows in the ground where you
What
live?
gross. There's yes, I harvest stone. Um, there's lots of limestone, which I use. And slate is probably my favorite, and that's probably what I do the most work in is slate, like
Yeah,
Welsh slate and Cumbrian slate. Um, and sandstone and a little bit of marble, but that's also very hard. Granite is one of
yeah,
those things that's mostly worked by the trade. That's mostly sandblasted because it's
yes,
so
yeah,
hard. People do carve it, and people do really beautiful carving in it. And I might come to it someday. You never know. Maybe a commission will force me to confront it in a way. But I prefer working in sort of, they're still pretty hard. Limestones and slates can be very hard still.
yeah.
Um, but but for what I'm doing, there's an element of nuance you want in it. So you want a material that works the best to render the best, final product. So for me, granite is not that.
Well, so what's your, really the thing that most struck me when I first discovered your Instagram account was kind of the really macabre whimsicality of
Mhm.
what you do.
Oh yeah.
um, it can't be all the people asking for a certain thing. Like when you have a commission,
Hmm.
do they just say, "Hey, I want a headstone or I want a house sign," and you just kind of let your imagination run wild? Or what's the process with when someone walks through your door or sends you a letter, requesting something? What's your process by which you then turn out what you're turning out, which is fantastic?
Well, a lot of the stuff on my Instagram, a lot of it is kind of personal work. So
Okay,
quote unquote gallery work, is what I would call it. So
sure,
that's a lot of the more macabre stuff is
yeah,
personal work. My own ideas that I'm making to either sell, online or to put in a gallery or
yes,
something like that. With
sure,
commissions, there's commissions like, it's the same in graphic design. If you're working with a brief with a client, there will always be parameters and constrictions on any kind of a commission, So people may want a very simple stone. Some people may want a very concise stone. So I can't just, unfortunately, it's not where people say, do whatever you want, because
Yeah.
it just doesn't happen. It's not the reality of it. But I try to present people with ideas that I think, fit within, something I want to make and fit within my style, but still address all their needs, because a brief is just, there are limitations and concessions you have to do when working to commission, So sometimes people are very free and they say, here's the basic info. What do you want to do? But sometimes it's more, specific, and I have to do something more traditional, say,
For a headstone, let's say,
Mhm.
if you had to make one for yourself, let's say,
Mhm.
what things would you want to put on it, in regards to, this kind of, well, I mean, the rock that stands over where your bones are.
Mhm.
What would you want to put on it that you want people to either know about you, or maybe like put a thought in their brain as they pass by and see it? Like what's important to you on a headstone? What would you want to see?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, that's something where that will change throughout my life, I'm sure. I think I'd want
Yeah.
something with a sense of humor in some way, somehow snuck in there. Sometimes that when you make a headstone, there are churchyard. If it's a churchyard, for example, or a cemetery, there are regulations. So you can't just make whatever you want and stick it in there. It has to get approved by some sort
That's
of
true.
regulatory body. So, you can't, unless it's on your own land or something like that, I suppose. I probably would like something with a tree of some sort. I'd love to have a skeleton
Okay.
or skull in some
Yes.
capacity.
On
And
a
I
swing
would
off the tree branch.
something, yeah, maybe a weeping willow with, a skeleton under a willow tree. Reality wise, my wife will probably be on it with me too. So there is an element of, can't do whatever I want to do, but,
Yeah, that's probably true.
show you realistic.
Well,
Like,
tell me, well, you bring it up. Tell me about what I want to know too. Like, so you're carving these kind of like macabre end of life stones, and I understand your wife is an artist too. But she operates kind of in a different medium.
well, she's a print and pattern maker. So she makes mainly wallpapers and fabrics, which are very beautiful. She hand draws and paints them all and then has them digitally printed. And hers are very focused on nature mostly. So lots of beautiful flowers and plants and
Yeah.
animals, loads of animals. So it's funny because I draw flowers and she draws flowers, but my flowers are very different kinds of flowers. Most of my flowers, I just
That's
make
true.
them up. They're not real flowers. I just make the shapes up, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that looks nice. Whereas she knows, she can do Latin names and everything, knows the genus and species and of some of them. So hers is much prettier than my work.
Do you think one is better than the other though? Because I kind of like the idea of having like this, the essence of a flower.
Yeah,
Like
that's what
there's
I'm trying
something
to
to
get
that
at,
that's
I
very
think.
attractive.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to treat flowers like I kind of anthropomorphize them and turn them sort of into figures. So they're like bending and kind of being very gestural and dynamic. You know what I mean? So they're
Yeah.
kind of characters for me, as opposed to like kind of elements of a scene where it is more for my wife. But I mean, flowers are just, there are certain symbols that just can represent so much, and flowers are
Yeah.
one of them because they have these historical, lilies representing death and all these sorts of things. But then you can make flowers do things and appear, in all sorts of ways. And it's sort of like, that's why like a weeping willow with a bent tree, it's not just
Yeah.
that, it represents this. It's just that it's very expressive, and you know what I mean? It harkens back to nature and our place within it. And that's one of the things I love about gravestones in general, is that they employ a lot of symbolism.
Yeah.
And that's really the main crux of my work, is kind of graphic symbolism, which comes out of my career being, when I worked in fashion, I was a t-shirt designer. So
Sure.
Yeah. So I did a
Yeah,
lot of like,
that's absolutely symbolism.
it kind of makes sense when people, when they say, oh, you worked in fashion, they're like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. But then when I say, oh, I used to do funny
Oh,
t-shirts and sayings, then they're like,
yes.
ah, right. Okay. That
Yeah.
makes a little more sense.
A headstone is a meme, you know?
Yeah. Sort of. Well,
There's something to it.
hopefully there's a bit more, it's a bit longer
Yeah.
lasting than that, but yeah.
Yeah. No, that's okay. That's fantastic. Because I'm kind of struck with the idea that like you and your wife are doing almost opposite things. Like she's working in nature as nature, you know, in this kind of flowy fabric, you know, covering of your home, and like building a stone is like working on a stone is like a very opposite, at least in my mind, seems like a very opposite, you know, heavy, hard.
Yeah.
They seem to be like very opposite dimensions, but it is kind of lovely that they overlap.
I mean, it's kind of like how some people who own dogs kind of look like their dogs or vice versa.
Yes.
Me and my wife kind of look like our work. Like hers is very soft and elegant and natural, and mine is very rigid and hardly fought and kind of a bit obtuse. You know, so it's sort of representative, I suppose. But I mean, at the end of the day, you know, she's presenting nature as nature, and I'm using nature as symbols to represent other things, because everything I make is a memento mori, you know, the gravestones. But
so do you have like a favorite symbol that you kind of always come back to?
well, I mean,
Is there something that you just love to sneak the skull? Oh,
the skull is
I
a
love
big
the
one,
skull.
you know. I mean, it's
It's
funny,
kind
when
of
I first
verboten
started-
in the funeral world.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I've not been able to carve a skull on a gravestone yet. I'm desperate to.
You can carve it on mine.
Well, there you go. Yeah, but it's always like people always play. They're like, "Well, I'll be sure to leave it in my will that you'll carve my gravestone." And I'm like, half the people are like, "I'll be dead before you will." There's nothing in this for me.
I have the same problem. You know how many people they'll be like, "Okay, so I'll have you sing at my funeral or whatever it is." I'm like, "Hey, there's no guarantees, lady. Like
Right.
you should pick someone."
Well, you'll be busy out back doing the real work, right? I mean, it's like,
Well, maybe. One thing, I guess. So you haven't lived in America in a while.
no, been a while.
At least where I'm at, like American headstones are hard. One, because they're made out of granite, so like they're very literally very hard.
Mhm.
But their symbolism has kind of been lost in the American headstone world. Like what's really popular now is to put like an emblem that symbolizes your job
Yeah,
on one side, and then on the wife's side, the rule is we can't really ever think of anything, so we just put like a flower. But it's like not like a beautiful, expressive flower. It's usually just like a rose that's clip art or
it was
something.
like clip art. I was gonna say clip art. I mean, that's true everywhere. That's true, not just
Is it?
America.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
so it's not just us.
No, I mean,
That's
there's,
good.
you know, I think being Americans, you think of England or Europe or whatever, you're like, oh, it's all so rustic and people are, you know,
Yeah.
the ages and the patina of time, and they're all like everyone's hobbits, and they're all smoking long pipes and drinking tea and stuff. I mean, they are drinking tea,
Yeah.
but it's just like that here. You know, most of the industry, 95% of it, is sandblasted, kind of generic typeset, badly typeset, usually headstones. And, you know, and it's like, it's hard because, you know, it kind of ties back to how I got into this, which was when I had my existential crisis, I would wander around the cemetery near where we lived in Bristol. And I one day was complaining to my wife about, you know, like, wow, look at all these headstones. They all look the same. It's so homogenous and blah, 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 probably for the 1,000th time. And she said, well, why don't you
sound a
make
lot
your
like
own?
me, if that feels any better.
But she's like, well, why don't you make your own? Why don't you stop complaining and make your own? And I was like, that's a really good idea. And that's literally what spun me down this whole path was
That's all it took.
complaining to my wife for the 1,000th time and her telling me to shut up, basically.
That's how all great men get anything done.
But it's the same thing. It's the same thing. And it's hard because not everyone has the money or the ability to commission something really special and bespoke.
Right.
And, you know, so having sandblasted kind of standardized headstones, there's a place for that in the world. You know, they're just
Of
It's the
course.
reality of the world, you know. And I have a lot
Yeah.
of friends in the trade and they take a lot of pride in their work, you know. And so I got a lot of respect for that side of things. But I think
Because it's not easy. I mean, it's still
no,
like you're still hauling around stones and bent over and
no,
chiseling.
it's
I mean, it's
people
not.
still try and make, you know, and there are still like old boys out there carving, hand carving granite and stuff. And, you
Yeah.
know, people are still doing it. But my end of the game, where it's a more creative end, like I don't view this as a trade. This is like an art to me. I'm making pieces of art, really. And,
Yeah.
you know, I'm what they would call a letter cutter, you know, or a letter
Yes.
carver. So, as opposed to a monumental mason or something like that, you know, which I am
Sure.
technically a monumental or memorial mason,
Yeah.
but this part of the game is such a small piece of the pie. And I think that's one thing that me and a lot of my fellow letter cutters, you know, have tried to really educate people and just let people know that we're out there doing this, because I think it's not just that people don't care or that people are cheap or that people, you know, can't be bothered. A lot of it's just people don't know people still do it, you know? So, you know, it's
Right.
just things like this is really good to let people know there are people who still draw and carve things by hand and put a lot of time and care into it, you know?
Here's a thought for you. So I'm an embalmer by trade.
Right.
Sometimes called funeral director. Mortician is like the fancy one. I
I
kind of
like
like
that.
undertaker.
Mortician's a cool word. I would
Yeah,
use.
mortician's cool. I really like undertaker a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
But my trade is like I'm an embalmer. That's kind of what I do.
mm,
And then I like plan events and stuff also. But
yeah.
one thing I've noticed about my own skill set as I've been doing this since I was 18.
Was it a
I've
family
been a
business?
licensed embalmer since. No, it's not. I'm what they call a first generation funeral director,
Wow, interesting. Everyone I've
which
ever
is a
met is
nice way of saying someone who's
always a
really
family
stubborn and
business.
dumb.
Right. It's funny
Yeah,
because you're the first person I ever met that's
yeah.
not a family business.
There are a few oddballs.
People call me an oddball.
Well, you are, which is why I'm talking to you. But
Yeah.
there's there's something I realized about my trade after a certain number of years doing it professionally. I was like, I crossed this barrier. There was embalming is like it has a scientific aspect, right? Where
Mm.
you're preserving the body, right? You're checking for color and tissue changes and killing bacteria. And then there was at a certain point, I don't know exactly when, but I crossed this barrier where it ceased being science and it started just being art.
Yeah.
Like I stopped paying attention to what my fluid indexes were. That didn't matter to me. I was like, what is the result? And like, what am I seeing in front of me? And how can I make this person look like themselves? And it became an art. But then when I realized that, I was like, oh no, all of my art is being put in the ground within a week.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm
yeah. Yeah.
creating this, like,
Ephemeral.
I mean, sub creating maybe, but I'm yeah, but it's ephemeral. I'm putting together this almost tableau for a family, and they're gonna see it and they're gonna remember it hopefully, and it's gonna make them feel better. But then
Mm.
in 4 days, it's gone. It's under the ground.
Mm.
And so I wanted to ask you, as someone who creates something that is, you know, anti-ephemeral, like whatever the opposite of ephemeral is,
Permanent.
the opposite of that, something very long lasting. Like, do you ever look back at your work and so for instance, if I have a body that I embalm, sometimes like they look great, but they're like underlying issues. They're starting to break down. I'm like, man, the minute we close that casket lid, I will be happy. Cause then,
Right.
whatever's all the corruption that's going on underneath, not my problem anymore. But with something that's more permanent, do you ever make a stone and you look back and you're like, I could have done better? Does it
Everything
ever
I
kind of
make.
kill you that like every mistake you've ever made is right out there in the open?
Yeah. Literally everything I make.
Yeah.
I don't like most of the things I make. I don't think any of it.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I've come to terms with it because I've realized if you're striving to work at a high level, you're kind of never really happy with what you've done. That's part and parcel of always trying to push yourself to get better, I think. But I mean, when I look at things, all I see are mistakes or things I could have done better. And I have to just,
Yeah. I see that.
Jedi mind trick myself into just accepting that that was as good as I could do then. And I'll try and do better next time.
So I mean, maybe you're wrong. I'll make a confession to you. Like, as confident or whatever as
Oh,
I
this is
seem
that
on
kind of
YouTube.
podcast, is it? All right.
It is. Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna make a confession to you. like my base mode of operation is self-loathing. Like
Right.
there is no one who dislikes me more than me.
Mm.
Um, do you have that? I mean, you're a weirdo who walks around the cemetery. Do you have the same problem?
I'm
Because I
not.
do.
I mean, it's really funny because people. I always tell people like I'm as gothy as it gets, and they're like, "You don't look like a goth," and I'm like, "Well, I sat around all day. I carved gravestones and I listened to black metal, so I think it's probably about as gothy. I just don't have the eye makeup. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
for me,
I like
the
that.
sort of it's not so much self-loathing, but it's more like, yeah, I don't know. There's not a lot of sunny days sometimes, but I kind of like that at the same time. Like, I think you see it in my work. Like, my work is quite dark, but there's a sort of like I try like a lightheartedness to it, like a sort of,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, like a resigned
Well,
optimism.
yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, that's okay, because that's what spoke to me. Because I usually call myself like an like a happy-go-lucky nihilist or something.
Right.
Don't worry, nothing's gonna be all right. That's usually what
Mhm.
I operate on. And as a result, like I think I'm pretty happy.
Oh, well,
Kind
see
of kind
that.
of
I mean, wherever works, I
stoicism.
guess, you know.
Yeah, but no, that kind of underlying whimsy is very funny because like I find that even around the funeral home, like most undertakers, if you get them a beer, are like very silly people.
Oh yeah. Well, when you deal with serious things, it's like doctors, you know, they see horrible,
Yeah,
hard things, but they joke about it, and that's how you deal with it. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
I mean, because I have people that just absolutely fall to bits, when they come and see a
Yeah,
stone, or you know what I mean. And there's an element of, and I'm sure you know it in your work. There's an element of grief counseling involved with doing this
absolutely.
sort of stuff, which, in the beginning, I wasn't sure if that was something that I could handle. You know what I mean?
How do you handle that?
It's funny. I kind of like when I was apprenticing, my apprenticeship was 2 years. And over the course of that, I really was like, oh man, I don't know if this is something, because I hadn't really had to deal with it too much because I was busy
Yeah.
working in the background. But when my apprenticeship ended, one of my very first commissions was for a cremation plaque for one of my best friends who was dying of
Oh,
cancer. And he commissioned me himself to make it while he was still alive. And it was, I mean, it was really heartbreaking. He couldn't like talk or anything. So it was always over because he had bile duct cancer. And,
oh God.
um,
Yeah, and that's one of the worst types of cancer, by the way.
yeah, it was horrible. And, he was only 34 or 35. And so it was a lot of like messaging me, but he was really excited about it. He was really into it, and it was something he was really like looking forward to seeing. And it was really hard because he was really ill, and I hadn't realized he was ill until he commissioned me. So it
Yeah.
was a race against time to try and get it done, and I didn't get it done before he died, and it was really shitty. It was like I was really
Yeah.
bummed out about it. But he was, but the whole process of that r- really made me understand that I can do this. And not only
Yeah.
that, yes, it's important work and it means a lot to people, but like I'm actually good at it, and I'm okay, and I'm good at handling people in that situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but it's a thing you don't know until you really face it, till you're really out in the field, as and I'm sure you experience that until you really, it's all academic until you've got a body laying in front of you or whatever. So,
Yeah. And then it's scary. And it's scary. Like I think another maybe commonality we have is like you can only embalm a body once,
right,
and you have to do it right the first time.
right.
You don't really get a lot of redos.
No.
Um, so it is scary, yeah, when you're thrust in this kind of like emotional situation. Um, so just honestly, last night I was embalming a body with a gal who had pancreatic cancer,
Mm.
and uh, pancreatic cancer, like bile duct cancer, very jaundiced,
Yeah, I
right?
was gonna
She
say
was
very
very
yellow,
yellow,
right? You get kind of yellow cast.
and as an embalmer, it's very tricky. So the element in your body that makes you turn yellow for jaundice is called bilirubin. And the thing is,
Oh,
in
what a
this like
silly
weird,
sounding name.
yeah, bilirubin, yeah, it's like silly Rubin, but it's
Yeah.
not. Because here's the really like ironic, like grossly ironic part, is that if bilirubin meets a formaldehyde, it converts into what's called biliverdin.
All
And
right.
biliverdin, you want to guess what color biliverdin
I'm
is?
going to say purple.
It's green. It's
Green?
green,
Oh,
green,
man. Yeah,
green. And so here's the thing. So it's like if you goof up,
they
grandma's
look like the
green.
Incredible Hulk or something.
Yeah, and it's like, and there's something about that like you see it and you register. Like if you saw someone who was pink, you'd be like, okay, something's not right, but it's okay. Or like maybe someone who like got real dark and you're like, okay, it's still green. Like humans should not be green colored. That's like
No, that
not
is
that's not on the spectrum.
yeah, no, it's not at all.
And
So,
so so the thing is like with that, you have to be very careful embalming. It takes more time. You have to be like very attention to detail. And like this gal that I'm taking care of, like I had to kind of internally dye her face to prevent the bilirubin from becoming biliverdin. So she's like real pink. And
wow.
I'm sitting here going like, well, I hope my first shot did it because I don't get another chance.
Yeah. Well, it's high stakes, you know.
It is high
Yeah.
stakes.
I mean,
It's
it's a
so high
bit like
stakes.
that with stone, not
Yeah.
literally, but in the sense that, you know, the most common question I get from anybody if I'm out, you know, at a show or I'm demonstrating is, what do you do if you make a mistake? That is,
That's actually a good question.
I mean,
Answer
that
that
is the
question.
number one. I've been asked that until I've been green in
Yeah.
the face.
Okay.
And so, you know, and I mean, I get why people ask it because it's a very logical question. And the answer I usually give is, I just don't make mistakes. Now, of course, I
Okay.
do. And
Oh yeah.
to some degree, how good you are is measured by how much you can fix things without people noticing.
Okay, that's fair. Well, that's my
You
job.
know,
It's just a shell game, you know.
yeah, I mean, there's an element in that, but generally speaking, it's high stakes in the sense that, you know, it's a reductive process. I'm taking away things that I cannot put back. You know, with wood, you
Yes.
can put wood filler in, or you can kind of glue it, and you can kind
Yeah.
of, you know what I mean? It's a more forgiving material. But with stone, once it's gone, it's kind of gone. There's not a great way to,
Do you would you say the stakes are higher because the stone itself is a dead material?
mm,
I'm just thinking there's like this crazy
well, so is
overlap with what
wood.
we're doing here.
Wood is dead too by the time you're
Yeah, that's
carving it.
true. That's
I mean,
true.
this is the
Yeah.
whole conversation of the sympathetic materials, and wood is warm,
Yes.
and you know, people view stone as cold and impersonal, and I do think I like that aspect in the sense that one of my main things is to bring warmth to the stone, to bring like a
Yeah.
human touch to it, to, you know what I mean? To warm it up
Right.
a bit, as it were. You know, what I always joke, wood is easy. Wood is already a warm, you know, lovely
That's true.
material. You know, it's like everyone, you know, want to have a piece of rub and rub it on your face and all that. But stone, to
Yeah.
make it something that somebody really loves or is really drawn to, I think really does require a bit more. You know what I mean? That being said,
It might
wood is way more complicated to carve. So
but it might need like the work of human hands to like become, you know, warm and human.
well, I think the other thing about stone is the closest thing we have to the physical manifestation of time itself. You know, like
Oh, I like this.
stone is literally strata. It's millions of years. It's like the rings of a tree. You know, it's like, you know, and so you know, one thing I think is quite nice is sometimes when I'm carving, especially slate or other materials, you'll have deposits of iron pyrite, fool's gold,
Yeah.
in it. I
Yes.
think that's fool's gold, but it's iron pyrite.
Yeah.
And which, you know, can annoy people, and annoys me sometimes too, because it's like, damn it, you know, you pay a lot of money, especially for slate. It's, you know, thousands of pounds to get the material, or thousands of dollars in American terms.
Nah,
And
that's okay.
but what is that metal? Lots of times that's a comet or a shooting star. You know, that's gone into the ground and embedded itself. You know, it
Yeah,
is intergalactic
you've got a
metal.
piece. Yeah, you've got a piece of space like above your grave.
Yeah. So
That's
so,
lovely.
you know, when you think about things in terms of that, it sort of, stone becomes this sort of, I think it's quite a magical material, because it's not just that it weathers and endures throughout time, but it represents time itself. You know what I mean?
Boy, that makes my work seem way more ephemeral than yours. That there's something, but it's beautiful though, because anything that you and I want to achieve, like you want it to last longer
Sure.
than a hot minute.
Mhm.
Um, and I think, gosh, working in stone, like you might be able to achieve that in a way greater than almost anybody else.
Well, I mean, it is one of the advantages of stone is that, when I make something, especially a headstone, I think about it in terms of the like his adding to the historical landscape. I think that's kind of what bothers me
I
sometimes
love
about
that.
having so many kind of generic headstones. It's
Yes.
like you think 200 years from now, what are they going to think of us as a civilization when they look at all these kind of homogenous,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
and it's I and I again I don't want to be judgmental, but sometimes you look at a cemetery and it looks like what I call a field of formalities. You know what I mean?
Ooh, you know what? I'm going to steal that from you because I have a field of formalities in my town. And
Hmm.
I've lately, I'd say last 3, 4 years, when someone comes in for a headstone, they'll be like, okay, so I want a tractor on dad's side and a loaf of bread on mom's side. I'll be like, we're not going to do that.
I know
Like
it's so hard,
I,
isn't it?
and so I've just been telling people no. I've been like, how about we just find something else that's more long lasting than a tractor that is also the same size as a loaf of bread when they're next to each other. that
No, I mean
that really bothers me a lot.
it's really hard because you I'm thinking about these things when I'm guiding people in designs in thinking like
Yeah.
this is not just about you. This is about people 50 years from now or 100 years from
Yes.
now.
Yes, and it's not just like a ledger with names either. Like it should be more than that.
I
It's
mean, and
art.
it's like
Yeah.
hard because you don't want to come off as a snob. You know what I mean? And like I said, like there is a place for sandblasted standardized headstones. I just
Yeah.
think there are too many of them and there's not enough. It's just the proportion that is wrong, because like I said, I don't
Yeah.
want to badmouth anybody who's in a firm and's been doing it for 50 years. Like there's a lot of value in that. And, especially if you don't have a lot of money, it's just like people who
Right.
commission my work are people generally who have the means to do it. You know what I mean? Not
Yeah.
always, but lots of times. So you have to accept that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just a fact of the world, really.
There's a headstone up near me, and it sticks in my craw as being like one of the worst offenders of this.
Hmm.
But the guy he was a salesman for let's call it Stuff and Co.
Right.
And he was a salesman for this company. He was the longest serving salesman for this appliance brand, like ever.
Right.
Okay. And so then what do we do on his headstone is we put let's just pick a logo. The Whirlpool logo we put on the corner of his side, because it has to be sides. And then on mom's side, they're like, well, she was a teacher. How about an apple? And I'm sitting here going, like, this guy, his guiding principle, he'd say it like 5 times a day. He'd say it every time I talked to him. He'd say, it's all about the people. It's like, why don't we put it's all about the people on the headstone? Like, that is so much more compelling than the,
For sure.
Whirlpool logo.
I mean, there's also, one advantage I have is that because I was a graphic designer before, I was used to working with clients with briefs and trying, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like trying to get ideas and iterate them to a point where it works. So like, for example, if somebody came to me and said, I want a tractor and I want an apple. Now, there's an interesting thing to be said. What if you did a landscape on the top of the headstone with a tree, with an apple in the tree, maybe alluding to Adam and Eve, and in the distance there's
Yeah.
a small tractor. You know what I mean? Like I'm quite inspired by folk art myself. So
Yeah.
like you can kind of take things and find a way to make them kind of more tasteful and more artistic and more enduring and more universal. That's part of
Well-
what makes a good designer and makes a good maker of this sort of
The
stuff, I think.
the universality of it.
Well, it's just, because it's like a Whirlpool logo. In 100 years, that may not exist, and people may not be like, what the heck is this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're gonna have disposable clothes. No one's gonna know anything about Whirlpool.
But if you say someone sold washing machines their whole life, what if you did a small tableau with like clothes hanging on a drying line or something, or
Yeah.
you
And like a
allude
river
to
running
some
by
way.
it. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so
no.
that's something I try to that's
I
a
love
gauntlet
that.
that's thrown down that I try to take up in my work, you know?
Yeah. No, do you ever so do you ever like mix media? Like do you ever do like stone and glass, or do you like I know I saw on the gram that you were doing some like metal twisting wire work, and
Oh
you've done
yeah.
some brass.
Yeah.
Tell me how do you mix media well? Because that's one thing that I think we don't see in headstones often, but I wish we saw it more.
Well, it's hard in headstones. That's,
Yeah.
I've seen headstones with glass and metal and bronze and stuff set into them, and they
Yeah.
can work. But when you're mixing materials and you're putting it outside, there are so many variables at play that it's not advisable. So,
Sure.
a lot of what I'm doing, the wire work is just for fun. I really love Alexander Calder. And and so I just kind of more or less, I've got offcuts of stone that I kind of use as weighted bases, and I just make these kind of wire things because again, I view this as an artistic practice. I'm an artist and I work in various media. So it's just something I do, and people buy them. So that's good, so I shall
Yeah.
continue to do it. The brass work is more based on monumental brasses, which is not something that exists in America. It's more
Tell
of
us
a,
about it.
well, monumental brasses existed in Europe and in England really up to about the 15th, 16th century. And they were often engraved pieces of metal set into a ledger stone that would have an inscription carved into it. So they were often like knights
And
or
is that on the like
noblemen.
ledger, like on the floor that
Yeah,
goes
so a ledger
flat
stone
on
would
the
be in the
ground?
floor. So often a
Okay.
monumental brass would be a knight in full armor, with his, regalia and maybe his
Yeah.
wife. And they're usually really rigid kind of figures laying side by side. And they're basically effigies, you know, um, because they started off as stone effigies where
Cool.
you'd have a figure, a dead figure laying on top of a tomb.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of those.
Yeah, so it's an evolution over time. They evolved to becoming brass work because it was cheaper. It was more compact. It could go on the floor, so people could
Yeah.
walk over
You
it.
can walk on it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and so
That's
I
interesting.
love all that stuff. I mean, old churches is going to old churches. I mean, the churches in Europe are just insane, because they're all
Yeah.
I live just outside of Wells, and it's one of the first examples of early Gothic in Britain. And it's just, I mean, there's nothing like it anywhere. You know what I mean? These cathedrals are just,
Yeah.
I mean, they're amazing. And they're full of just beautiful memorials and tablets. And, it's like a kid going to a candy store for me. You know what I mean? So,
Well, isn't
yeah.
isn't it kind of interesting? So where you're at, you have people buried in the church, under the church, in the walls, in the churchyard.
Mhm.
Like your dead are kind of with you. And I think in America, for good or ill, we have the cemetery, which exists as kind of its own separate in between space.
Uh,
But I think there is really something beautiful about kind of having the dead nearby.
yeah. I mean, it's
Having
also, it's a social thing too, though.
well, sure,
People started to be buried outside because, people buried in churches were aristocrats and bishops and kings.
yeah,
And the people who were buried outside couldn't afford to be in the church. So the rich merchants and things, they were the
hmm
ones who ended up being outside. And then, when you move into the 17th and 18th centuries, where getting a headstone becomes more affordable and more accessible, then you get kind of wealthy farmers. You know what I mean? So it grows out of the
yeah.
social caste, the social construct. America is so new, I guess if you go to New England, you've got colonial, which I'm massively inspired by colonial headstones.
Oh,
That's
aren't
my
they
jam.
so cool?
Oh
I
man,
I
that is my
would
jam.
love I would love to make one of those.
No,
Yeah. Oh, they're
I've,
fantastic with like the head, the angel head and the wings and like
oh
the
yeah, the cherub's heads.
hourglasses
Yep.
and
Yep. Death's
yes.
head.
Oh,
I'd love to put a
that
death's head on a headstone someday. The skull with the wings, that's a death's head.
yes. No, and the epitaphs are so lovely and like and kind of frank, which I think
Yeah.
is very funny. I see we don't really do epitaphs I think often enough. I think like words are a very missed opportunity in the regular run of a headstone.
It's the main thing why I got into doing this, really,
Yeah.
because the thing that's awesome about what I do is this medium, this craft allows me to combine my love of images and my love of words. So I write short stories, I write epigrams. And so I write all my own inscriptions. So all of my fine artwork, a lot of letter carvers tend to carve like famous quotes like George Bernard Shaw or Shakespeare or something like that.
Yep. Tennyson.
And I'm in it to, for good or ill. And I'm sure people, I'm in it.
It'll keep you poor, Matt. Don't worry.
But it's cool because it allows me to do all that,
Yeah. So, I mean, someone else's stone kind of becomes like a chip off the block, it's part of you.
For sure.
I adore that.
And some people aren't willing to do anything, it's just, beloved father, grandfather, and most people, you realize that's the other thing. I had all these grand ideas of doing all this really amazing, eccentric work. And the reality is most people don't want anything that's that different. Most people want kind of the typical, and, I try to drag them into doing something at least a little bit different, but where I can, I love writing epitaphs for gravestones. But my fine artwork is really where I get to flex that muscle of doing sayings and epigrams and things like that,
I love that. Well, how about this? Would you have some artwork to share? Let's get a picture of pick one that you sent, and we'll pull it up here so we can take a look. And I just want to break it down together.
Okay. These are just some of the ones that I like particularly.
Here, so we have a pebble. It says the crushing weight of responsibility.
Yeah. This is a part of a series of pebbles I've been doing where the pebble itself is referred to or part of the saying. So it's like the object is part of the saying, or it's self-referential, I guess.
Yeah, it's really nice that you put it on a really, really big rock. So that at least makes it seem a little more manageable.
It's meant to be
I like
paperweight,
yeah.
And actually, the client who bought it is a lovely person who collects my work and is a judge. And that's their paperweight on their desk. So it's very fitting.
Oh, that's fantastic. I like that.
Yeah. I was very pleased with it. Very pain in the butt to carve, but I'm pleased with it.
That's fantastic. Let's pull up the next one here. So this is probably one of the first, or at least something similar that I've seen, where you like to incorporate the skull and a bird, like a skull and a bird, and those two things are so lovely together.
It's funny because I made this. I don't know. It's one of my early pieces I made after my apprenticeship, so it's probably 3 or 4 years old now, and it's still maybe my favorite thing I've made. I think it works the best out of a lot of things I've made. One of the things that's exciting about letter carving is that it allows you to interface directly words with visual images. In a lot of art forms, words and imagery is separate, or
sure,
or very,
or it's interchangeable even.
Yeah. And there are people throughout history like William Blake, used to incorporate text and things. I love all those sorts of people, but it allows me to take my ideas and combine them and kind of give different dimensions to them. So, I had the saying first, long live the little things. That was just an epigram I came up with. Yeah. And I knew I wanted to do a skull. And this was actually the first skull I did properly. And the first bird I did properly. And, and it's kind of with my things, I like them to work on multiple levels if I can. So, the long live the little things refers to generally in life, but it's also, there's this small narrative here where this worm has escaped the bird. Yes. And
it's only by the shadow of death, no less.
Yeah, and he's hiding under the skull. This with the great irony, and then the flower. I sort of had a little surreal twist and made the flower one of the clouds as well. Yeah, and so there's kind of, I like it making things where there's different levels of meaning and understanding on them.
It's lovely. It's
Thank
lovely.
You. Yeah, I do like that. What do we design?
This one, oh, this is so beautiful. I remember seeing this come across my feed. It says he never settled for the standard.
This is a commission. This is a memorial, actually.
Is it?
Yeah, but it's a memorial for a garden. So it wasn't going in a churchyard. It's in a private bit of land. But this is a really good example of how a design can address a brief and work again on multiple levels. So the client, her father had passed away and he loved jazz and she wanted to do something with jazz. Now, a lot of people would just put a trumpet on it or something, or musical notes. And like, I just did not want to do that because it's just, again, you get in clip art territory.
Yeah.
But I had this idea of this kind of jazz trumpeter with a cool hat. I just had it in my head. And I came up with this saying, she didn't want like his name and date. She wanted something that was kind of represented him as a person. So he loved jazz, but he also never kind of went with the typical way of doing things. He was kind of a very much an individual, and kind of uncompromising in certain ways. So the saying works on two levels. It works on, he never settled for the standard in life, but it also refers to a standard in jazz.
Oh, that is lovely. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. So there's
fantastic.
So this is what I mean. Like, I think my most successful pieces have multiple levels of meaning in them.
Yes. And I kind of like that there's no name. There was a stone we put out a couple years ago that just had like the person's first name, like the husband and wife, just their first names and two hearts. And like no dates, no nothing. And I kind of adore the simplicity of it.
Yeah. I mean, why not? You know what I mean? It's like whatever works, it's every situation is different.
And also like to put the impetus on the viewer a little bit, to like do a little work, like figure out who, Sharon and Wayne are. You go figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and also, you want to have, it's like going to see a picture in a museum. The best pictures have an element of depth to them where, you look at it, you get an immediate effect. But if you actually sit and look at it for a little while, you might get an added layer of meaning or, or an extra detail you didn't notice. So I try to do that in my work where I can. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Can I show you some of my work?
Oh, do it.
I have some actual work that I've done by hand that is not very good. I'm getting better all the time. That's not very good. So what I am going to show you are things that I've had my granite shop sandblast for me, but I've designed the size, the shape, the spec. At least I've had the thought behind it. So I'm not to the point where I could make these things myself, but we're getting there.
Yeah. Well, it's a whole process,
I recently put up I finished my first hand-carved headstone for these. I've been marking graves for paupers in my little Catholic cemetery in town. And, they've all been dead for 60, 70 plus years. And I just put up one that like is not very good. Like I had a couple like tattoo artists who were like, you should get some stencils. You should get better. And like, I don't disagree. I need to get better, but also like, I also need to do the thing. I also want to like complete the task, and whether or not it's perfect is kind of immaterial in some ways.
Wow. I mean, nothing's ever really perfect. I mean, even the most perfect looking letters, if you look at them long enough, you'll see they're not,
Okay, here's one I wanted to show you. So this is a flat marker in a cemetery.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
And I kind of actually took a cue from the ledgers that you see in old cemeteries or in Great Britain, the big long ones that go over the whole grave. And so this is for a cremation. But I realized that I'd say most flat markers are 12 by 24 inches, let's say, and they usually go horizontal. And I was talking to my granite shop, and I was like, can we put it long ways? And they're like, well, I don't know, we've never done it, but okay.
Why not?
And so I put this out for this gal, Stella, and we have a little Polish cross with a heart in it, because she was full on Polish despite her last name.
Right.
And the daughter was telling me like, well, if I put up flowers, they're just going to get knocked off. Can we, what are we going to do? And so I was like, what if we cored a hole through the whole thing and we planted a living plant in there? And so it has a foundation around it. So that way, like the mower doesn't, burn over it. It can avoid it. But every year, like this perennial comes up on Stella's grave, and it's kind of like in her little spot.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you. And so I've been trying to do more flat markers long ways, just because I think it is a little more compelling. There's like that vertical element that you see, right? That you see in the Gothic that I think is like it tilts your mind upward. And so
Well, it's
I've been
also
trying to
just
do that
different,
more and
you know.
more. And it's different, yeah, because that's
Yeah.
the other thing. I can't do that anymore. This was very interesting. So I had a gal call me out of the blue, and she didn't even know how to start talking to me. But it turned out that her elderly parents had died together in a car crash in Michigan, so 3 states away.
Mm.
And the car burst into flame. They were burned into nothing. And so we had to plan this double funeral for this couple.
Oh man.
And very, and I was very happy because in some ways she said, I don't know how to do this, Victor, but just take the reins. And so thinking about words and the meaning they have, what I did is I put their first names and the year they were born, and then at the bottom it says they're united in marriage and their wedding date, and then it says together in eternity with their shared death date. Because I think like, and sometimes less is more, and if you find a way to kind of save yourself, not just like the letters, like you don't want to do extra work, man, but like there's something about knowing like, oh, that those dates are both shared. They ought to we don't have to list them twice.
No, for sure.
And
I mean, it's simpler is better oftentimes, especially wordiness. I'm not into I like words, but I'm not into wordy, inscriptions.
That's maybe the key of all of it, I think, is like simplicity. The simplicity of living, the simplicity of dying, right?
Yeah.
It's this thing that we're all going to do. And maybe there's something okay too about the simplicity of a headstone, at its heart being a rock, but also, as you say, being a piece of time, maybe having a piece of space in it. Maybe like even those grand, magnificent things are also simple enough for us to enjoy. And I think there's like a great beauty in that. There's a great beauty in that.
The other side of it, I mean, I think that's all true, but the other side of it is also, I don't look at a gravestone as a death marker. I look at it as it's a celebration of a life. It's a signpost saying this person was here and existed, and you try to give some semblance of who they were as a person. But it's like somebody's planting a flag on the moon, but it's your little flag in this. It's in this planet. It's your little flag here, for your life,
Yeah, here on this great big rock of ours. Well, Matt, I really want to thank you for just taking the time to talk to me across the Atlantic, to just riff on headstones and big things and small things, and truly, it's been an absolute pleasure to look at your art from a distance, yes, but to have you here on the show and talking with us about these things, both great and small. Long live the little things, right? I think we've done it today, and I just wanted to thank you for that.
Well, thanks for having me. It's nice to, that the lovely thing about the internet is that you can find like-minded peoples, and people that inhabit those little similar niches of the mind,
Absolutely.
And keep up with the stone carving, the design and what you showed is really good, and it shows a lot of forethought, and it's one of those things. It's a craft. It's a process. You just got to stick with it.
Well, I'm going to keep asking you for advice along the way, so just keep checking your inbox, all right?
Okay, I'm sure I will. I promise.
Fantastic. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Matt Loughlin today. Yes, you get to hear me nerd out about headstones and epitaphs and that kind of thing. But I think we also plumbed some beautiful ideas about all the things that make us tick, and how we share those things with one another while we live, sure, but also after we pass. For Matt, maybe it's carving a flower that doesn't exist except for his own imagination. And I think there's something really beautiful about sharing those little bits of our imagination with others in a very permanent, lasting way. With any luck, our friend Matt's work will last for a long time, but not all art has to last forever. It's okay, I think, too, if some things are ephemeral and fleeting, because life is is brief. That's the way living works. 1 minute you're here, the next minute you're gone. And just accepting that and knowing we leave behind some things of importance along the way, maybe that's enough. I hope you enjoyed our podcast today. And I say our podcast because it's something that I want to share with you, but I want you to share back with me. I'm grateful for all of you, listeners, team, everyone. So continue to support us and we'll support each other. Thank you for joining us on Death and until we see each other again, I'm Victor M. Sweeney.